Welcome everyone. You're listening to the ICCA India podcast. Through the podcast series, we hope to bring out multidisciplinary dialogues by discussing the intersections of economics, policy, and cancer.
Hello everyone, this is the next edition of the India portion of the Innovation for Cancer Care project. I am Smita Srinivas. I am the India research lead of the project. As many of you know, this is a multi-country venture where we're trying to have a detailed discussion with a range of different interlocutors about what is going on in cancer care. Can we be innovative? How is it that countries like India or the UK or Kenya or Tanzania or others might get better access or more innovative cancer care? So this should be of interest to many of you. I want to invite and welcome Mr. Subramanyam today. He is with Panacea Medical Technologies. He is someone with a great deal of experience in this industry. And given how significant medical devices and diagnostics are in cancer care, it is our pleasure to invite him to the conversation today. Mr. Subramanyam, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on this call.
What your inspiration has been in setting up the work that you do in Panacea Medical Technologies, and how it is that we can learn something from your journey into this space.
Yes. One single item that has inspired me and another two colleagues who together started this is about making more access to radiotherapy. This is way back about 20 years ago that we started this venture. But we understand that at that point of time, we were India focused because India was having a lot of inaccessibility to radiotherapy and cancer therapy in general. From there, yes, it has taken us to a situation where we have a globally relevant solution today. And that globally relevant solution is also more focused on affordability, and therefore it is also made to deliver therapy to patients in the LMI countries. This has been the focus for this company for about last 20 years, and we continue with that. And how we have achieved that is with a lot of technology going into the product. Therefore, we are a high-tech company, but we also ensure that we deliver a solution which is relevant to the LMI countries.
One question I have for you, Mr. Subramanyam, is could you tell our audience a little bit more about the geographic spread of Panacea Medical Technologies, and where are you in Africa as well?
Yes, we have been focused and all the development and all the manufacture happens in Bangalore, India. But as has been our vision, we have to make things which will work in very difficult conditions. Therefore, from the initiation of any project idea or any product idea, we take into consideration what is going to be the difference between what we will deliver versus what is already existing in the market. Some of what we are doing is already existing in the market. So there's nothing like we have brought in some solution which is out of the world. But what we are confident is we have brought in a solution which is actually relevant to countries like India, Africa, and several other low-income countries. The relevance is they do not have the capex as well as they do not have the opex money to run such a complicated machine. Neither do people have, in most of these countries, trained manpower. These are the three items that we have to look at when we want to make access to radiotherapy to every person across in their domicile. That is, the cancer patient is in many situations in these countries, which has been our focus area, is not able to travel to a metro city, and therefore the treatment is not being even started for such people. And that is what is the basis on which we have looked at innovations on how we can work this machine to deliver in conditions where there is no trained manpower. With very little training, somebody should be able to use this equipment, and it's dealing with lethal radiotherapy. What it means is the beam, if it is really not directed properly, it is lethal, and therefore it's not really good to have somebody who is not able to run it. So when we don't have such manpower, we have to focus on how to automate, how to remove the uncertainties, and how we can actually make every delivery safe, irrespective of the skill set of the people which is available at these centers. One more part which works is there's a bit of a planning on how the treatment has to be delivered. This, if it can be done outside these remote locations, and if it can be centralized outside of a tier 2 city or a tier 3 city, then it actually delivers the same kind of delivery as is received by patients in a metro city. If that can be achieved, then it actually means a lot, because we are decentralizing the whole delivery of radiotherapy to patients across. This has been done by going one step backward and separating the planning and the delivery into two different modes. What we did is we have removed the planning part and separated it out from the actual delivery which happens at the site where the patient is residing. So when we have been able to effectively separate these two out, we have achieved something which is not currently existing by being able to go to a tier 2 city very effectively. This is where we have actually used technology in trying to separate these two functionalities and then bring total control of what we deliver to the patient, but the technical experts would be hundreds of kilometers away from where the actual delivery occurs, but they have full control over it. This is the way we have been able to implement it.
So, Mr. Subramanyam, you are making an interesting point, which I think for both economists and policymakers, as well as those interested in logistics, the separation of trained people from the design of equipment tends to be done and thought of either in very idealistic manners, that is, you will find them when you need them, or we cannot have machinery that doesn't use labor, or we have situations where we separate out the last mile delivery problem from those that design and manufacture issues. So can you talk us through this? Because I think here is something where Panacea has been innovative. Could you talk us through this problem?
In an urban setting, we would require an oncologist, a medical physicist, and technologists to deliver radiotherapy effectively to every patient. So when all of these three people are required, the oncologists have to see the patient, no doubt, but not required. What if they are not required to be available most of the time when the treatment occurs? That is the first question. Second part is, what if the way in which the treatment has to be delivered can be planned and it can be implemented in a way where we do not depend on the skill set of people to position the patient or to effectively understand and monitor whether the treatment has been going on correctly or not. So the first part is, if the oncologist is actually probably even able to counsel the patient on E-mode, even that is feasible. So what we require is, we require the reports for the patient, the pathological reports, the CT scans, and then in most scenarios, a decision can be taken without physical meeting requirement as a mandatory requirement for the oncologist to be available. So we will be able to make the decision and make the plan when they are physically not available or when they're quite far away. The second part is of the skill set is the medical physicists, who actually, or is also called dosimetrists in some countries. The dosimetrist's role is to understand how to deliver the dose what has been prescribed. And this, if it can be also done remotely, and that in a very secured way, we deliver to the machine, and the machine in turn delivers this very effectively by a lot of checks and balances which we'll go through during the process of delivery. And prior to that, then it is quite safe for the patient to receive the dose, and it can be done in a setting where there are few skill set requirement at each of these remote or tier 2, tier 3 cities. That is what is the way we have been able to bifurcate the requirements and then addressed each of these items. So the last part is how do we ensure with very minimal skill set the safe delivery of precise dose to the patient. That can be done when the machine is able to exactly monitor every event all through the process. The actual time for treatment is actually can be broken into two parts. One is when the patient has to be put on the couch and aligned with respect to set defined protocols. And the second part is when actually the beam is delivering to the tumor through the healthy tissues of the patient. These are the two events that we have to segregate it into. So we have segregated this, and we have understood that if there is an error in the patient setup, which is the skill set requirement from a technologist or a technician who actually runs the machine, then there is a great error that can happen. The patient can receive something drastically wrong. The second part is if the beam is not controlled properly, and if it is not monitored, and if it is not really tracked, then also we can deliver something wrong. And that is, these are the two main items we can again subdivide and address each of them. So the common practice today is people think that alignment is something that they can do without capturing an image, an X-ray image or some such image of the patient on every treatment basis. So what we have done in our workflow for all our machines is it's mandatory to take an image on every day. If you do not acquire the image, it's not allowing the beam, the therapy beam to be put on. So when it is forced upon in the workflow, it is enforced. Once it is enforced, we have about 85% of the problem has been resolved on how we are able to deliver a well-planned, well-aligned treatment to the patient. And this is also having another subgroup wherein are we going to depend on the technologist or are we going to depend on some other technique wherein this imaging can be done automatic. So here is where we have done something like machine learning protocols on how the patient, if the patient is aligned to lie down on the couch very grossly in a difference of about 1 foot. 1 foot is 300 mm. Within 300 mm, if we are able to align the patient on the couch, because some of the patients actually, when they come at a slightly advanced stage, they cannot actually move, manipulate themselves on the couch. So this is another issue which we have to consider, because the technician may have the skill set, may not have the patience. They may not have neither the patience nor the skill set to align. So this is a process where the technician does not need to touch the patient at all. That's how we've been able to look at it. If that is actually achieved, then we will be able to align the patient within that 300 millimeters margin, and then we actually take an image of this patient and then find out what has been the plan versus what is actually the current position. Then what if the couch can actually manipulate itself and then adjust to bring the position of the patient with respect to the planned position automatically. So this is where technology comes into picture. So we have designed a 6-leg robo beneath the couch, and that couch will manipulate the patient in all kinds of positions, and that algorithm works in less than 5 seconds, just under when the patient has received those 2 X-ray beams. And we're not wasting a lot of time, but we're able to do it very effectively and achieve a positional accuracy of 1 millimeter in all directions, X, Y, Z, and roll your pitch in less than 0.3 millimeters and X, Y, Z in less than 1 millimeter. So once we have achieved this, it is quite easy for us to understand how we have removed the skill set requirements from the technologist, but the technologist is required to safely put the patient on the couch and then ask to get away from the couch. Then we are actually able to do it. In this method, we've been able to subdivide the actual task of radiotherapy into minuscule tasks which can be automated. And once we have done this, this is something that will work in a remote location. And there are other parts of doing the planning, how the beam has to enter the patient's body, where it should exit, how is it affecting the organs. All of that is well defined in radiotherapy. So this can be done remotely from another metro hospital location or a centralized location, which India can have them in Nairobi, but all of these others can be located far away. And as long as we have an internet connection, which is actually one great advantage in all the African countries as well, is they have a very good internet connection. And through that, using the internet connection, they can securely download this record to the machine, and that can be delivered to the patient. And as a result, we can reduce the time in which we can implement a project like this, because it's not just that someone gives a grant. Somebody can give 100 million grant and then say some 40 such machines can be deployed, but we need skilled manpower, and if they are not there, all this money is actually going down the drain.
Sorry to interrupt. I do have a question on this, because, it is often the case that in health policy, in certain areas of clinical practice,
Yes.
certainly in economics and public policy, perhaps even in engineering, people aren't really brought into the discussion of what it means to be affordable and the relationship of affordability with a kind of customization and precision. People tend to put these in different boxes. Somehow that there's a kind of a low-tech version for the poor and a high-tech version for the rich and so on. But there's a further complexity to it, which I'd like you to maybe address from your own experience, which is the component elements of the design of the instruments that you work with, the devices, tend to themselves be both, on the one hand, easy to get, and some are more complex pieces. They themselves are composite instrumentation. So I wonder if you can address this issue, because, and certainly in some of the policy arenas I sit in, affordability tends not to be understood. It tends to be affordability to the patient as opposed to a way in which to think through both the device as well as the delivery mechanism that could make affordability a little bit more reachable. So let me maybe ask you to address this.
Yes, there is a perception that high cost is something that we can't make. High tech is what we cannot make affordable. So we strongly don't believe in that at all. Affordability can be created by technology. If you take the example of internet is less costlier in the LMI countries than it is in the developed countries. Okay, so we use the same switch, we use everything, same technology, the same accelerator, everything is same, but it is more affordable. Why? Because we have a larger volume in the markets and therefore it is there. But coming to medical devices, I would want to bring this item. If we want to look at cost versus pricing, there's a big difference. So the pricing is actually what we confuse with. High technology is something that people want to price it high. Therefore, whatever is already to be decommissioned in some advanced country environment is something which is gifted or doled out and given to LMI countries, and that doesn't work. And I have personally visited several hospitals across Africa. I've even traveled where there is no place for a truck to go or even a car to go, and those places have machines which have been donated because these have been removed from some other advanced country, and then they would want to click a photograph saying that I've donated this machine, but it had probably not served the purpose of treating patients, because one is it's an outdated technology and therefore it's not relevant. No good technician, the technician who has to run or repair this machine would not have the patience to go to such a environment. They don't have the energy nor the mindset to go and make these machines work. So what will work in such compelling conditions of these countries is high technology. The latest technology is what we have to deploy here, and that will make things work. Why? Because it is current. The components are available everywhere across the globe. You can do it. I have to source an IC. If I have to source an IC which is currently used in all other equipment, even including household appliances, then that is a device which is easily sourceable to these countries and they can afford it. So we strongly believe that if you have to deploy anything in LMI countries, it should be the best technology. and how to make it affordable. Yes. So that is something that you have to do from the time you start the design. Whenever you want to make it affordable, you should be very clear that the technology component should have a lot of software component in it. If it has a lot of software component, it's a one-time investment that you're going to do. Yes, there are maintenance costs for software as well, which is not low cost, but yes, it is comparatively easier to update because you can download a new version to that machine sitting in wherever you are in this company. Sitting in Bangalore, for example, we can download our next versions of the code, which costs us far lower than putting somebody on a plane and replacing a large bit of hardware. So that takes a lot of difference. It makes a lot of difference in that. And when the hardware actually has some problem, again, you have one more person to go. So what we have done from the initial stage of design is converted majority of the functions, which can be converted into a software controller than hardware physical device. So there's one physical device which are actually running several of the operations. It's running at very high speed. That's a real magical thing because a lot of code has to be working at good speed and all that. And that has to work in an environment where air conditioning may not work. The air conditioning in the rooms where we deploy these will not work because that's the fact of life there. So you cannot maintain 19 degrees centigrade when the temperature outside is 32 degrees centigrade, and they don't have an AC, and therefore all the patients have to go home because of that. So we have to actually tropicalize that. And there's another environment to which we also have designed our equipment. If we go to majority of the CIS countries, which probably may not be your current interest, but they have a different scenario. They cannot have the money to heat the room. This is one other reality that we have actually acquired during our meeting with all of these hospitals one-to-one and even on some calls. So in some severe winters, they do not have money to heat the hospital sufficiently and the temperature is freezing. So these are conditions that are reality. If we can make our equipment to work in these difficult conditions, it's a very good design. If at the design stage we can take care of all this, the cost will actually be lower. This is how we've been able to bring high technology at affordable cost.
You're raising a couple of other issues, which is, of course, lateral design, precisely because you're swapping out components or you have a repair ecosystem, allows you to get into some of these both hardware as well as software substitutes, right? They end up being complements in a certain way. But I would imagine, therefore, looking at the news in the US currently of running out of oxygen, the oxygen question, for example, during COVID, has struck different countries in rather different ways. And it has not been a function of how industrialized they are, because the way in which they have assembled their compatibility with their hospitals and what they define as their last mile has been the way in which they have lost access. So it reminds me in a way, when you are dealing with heating and cooling problems, these are issues, of course, that affect a range of instruments. Could you tell the viewers, before I hand off to Ojasvi Ghar, could you tell the viewers a little bit about the kind of instruments you deal with on a daily basis in terms of design, or at least at an earlier phase when perhaps you were not quite as senior? What was the holy grail? What has been achieved? And sort of what's next?
Our primary design started when we did not have Google to search. So that's one major difference that I can see now. Life is very easy these days where we can search out and ask Google whatever we want and we get a very right answer. That's a real good development that has happened. And this has empowered a lot of people.
I wanted to ask, how do you think that education in engineering needs to change, or even education in general, when you talk about opportunities in education, how do you think that as a whole education needs to change?
I haven't really put myself into that because it's probably outside of my view. But what I agree with Smita's view is that when I go through 17 to 18 years of schooling, I'm actually ensured I'm polished to an extent where all my creativity can be killed. And once that is not killed, people can deliver far superior results, but the system actually removes all the creativity, and they would actually look at compliance, which is the biggest hurdle I see, because when we recruit people, we experience this a lot.
But maybe another way to ask it is that, of the candidates that you do see who are coming in from engineering backgrounds, what is it of the 1 out of 40 that stands out? Is there a correlation with perhaps they've managed to keep their spark alive despite their training?
Yes. So some of these people probably did not enjoy the college life, and therefore they were not the toppers or something like that. But consistently, there has been some incidents in their family which probably has enlightened them to look just beyond going to school and coming back and then writing an exam to pass. So this is consistently there in all of them. So there has been an incident in the family where, because of which they had some kind of a trouble, either financial or non-financial, and such people actually have demonstrated. It's not a criteria for them to join Panacea. Because you asked this question, we've also been doing this analysis because we've been recruiting people for the last 17 years now. And therefore, consistently, there is some such thing which will actually make people to exhibit abnormal capability in these items. But somebody who has been pampered by the parents and who's been probably given everything that was required did not exhibit this as much as others did.
Yeah. No, my observations in my own classrooms are not that different. Yeah. Ojasvi, go ahead. I interrupted you.
So I had a second question as well. Do you think that given the scale of medical device and diagnostic design, there is a need to shift priorities in science and technology?
Yes, I would answer this question specifically from two perspectives: applied research and engineering. These are the two things that I can correlate to and I can apply. So in these areas, the kind of curriculum that is there has to be revised very often in these days. Maybe every third year, the curriculum has to be revisited. That will actually make things relevant to what it is there. Today, what is being taught in the school, in the engineering schools, is some of it is actually not relevant because it's actually past tense and we no longer use it. The fundamentals, yes, are required. So something like basic science and basic social science and economics, these are required for every student, irrespective of which discipline, even if they want to become a doctor by profession, it's required. But specifically in these changing times, revisiting the curriculum syllabus has to come at much faster pace, which is not coming. This is what is our observation.
Could I ask a question on, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit more about the actual instrumentation itself, not just your portfolio of products, but also a little bit of the specifics of one or two items that are unique to Panacea. You've been in this business a long time, and yet you probably see competitors, you see others in this space. What is it that you think is still your competitive edge?
Our competitive edge is understanding the requirements. It might sound silly. Why is it that others can't understand? It's your perspective. Like when you see something, you have different perspectives. 3 different people will have 3 different perspectives on what has to be, what is their perception of what they see in a scenario out there. So when we look at what is the need, so our perspective is probably different, and that is how we'll be able to deliver. So why we stress on automation? You talk to any one of us for about 15 minutes, and everyone will talk about automation. So it's not that because we have some skill sets. Actually, we did not have skill sets. We had to forcibly acquire all the skill sets because that is the way of life. And without that automation, probably our ultimate aim of making things affordable would not come into picture, and therefore we have to go and learn and then be a real expert at all of this. So that is the primary thing, is our perception is different. So to give you an example of what we do, we know that for a precise delivery of radiotherapy, everything has to be monitored, which means a lot of monitoring. When the beam is on and the patient is on the couch, we need to monitor at every 1 millisecond, we have to monitor that. And how do we do it is something we cannot use a standard solution which we can buy from someone else. One is, an exact solution of this kind is not available readily, that is one thing. If it is to be available, it would be coming at a very exorbitant cost, which we cannot afford, because our goal is to lower the cost to the ultimate thing. So that sets us apart in being able to do all of this, going backward, applying whatever we have learned in school, and then there would be a new department formed once in 3 months like this to actually take up something as an applied research in those areas. So of late, though it is not exactly a relevant thing in our product, how to measure radiation, how to measure a clock pulse, and how to measure fluctuation in the voltage of a device. All of these have become individual departments, and we have acquired some skill sets. We filed patents as well on this. If you go back maybe 3 years ago, when these departments did not exist, did we actually make things? Yes, we did make, but that time when we now look back and see, we haven't been able to do it so good. That's why it didn't come up in the previous instance, and therefore it has come up now. So this is how we see. And the single answer to your question is, our perception is different. When we look at a specification, what we read in the specification is slightly different from what others read. That is how we are able to make this goal to be met, that is making it affordable but using good technology.
It's problem framing, which is itself different. The perception is different, and then the problem framing is different. But there's a further point you just made, which is that in a way you are vertically integrating back many of the functions in order to customize. Would that be fair?
Yes. Wherever there was a need on those two counts, one is technology not available, so we have to do it ourselves. And when it is affordable, not affordable, then we are forced to do it ourselves. These are the two ways where we've been going backwards and integrating everything.
Do you have plans for further expansion in Africa?
Yes. The expansion is like this. We would be able to offer our solutions to the hospitals and even bring up training for the people, which is also automated. And what we are currently not able to take is a part of our design or a part of our manufacturing, we are not yet able to take to the shores of Africa. The reason for that is also clear. It's very evident that some of this, if it was supposed to be making something repetitive, like you make an automobile and some of it is already, the assembly line, for example, is already made in this place and then shipped out, and somebody will actually only run a factory, then maybe it would have been very easy to do it. But most of the medical equipment are handcrafted, if you want to do. Many of them are not produced in an assembly line. They're still produced in batches. They're produced by a set of skilled people. It's not the skill in their hands, it's the skill in their way of thinking. So we haven't yet been able to locate all these skill sets yet in any country. We did explore. We've been invited by several countries through their embassies to visit. Our team has visited, except for Republic of Congo, every other country we would have traveled. We would have traveled not only to the capital city, we would have traveled to at least another 3 or 4 another tier 2 cities or towns, and understood what is it relevant. This is the extent to which we have studied Africa. And the West Africa, again, except for maybe 3-4 countries we would have traveled. The Central Africa, yes, Congo is one region we have been there. There was some security reason, and most of our innovators who actually travel are actually ladies. This company has a large pool of ladies who drive us. Everything what we do is controlled by very active team of ladies who actually drive, and it was not really safe for us to go there, so we couldn't go. But any other West African country, yes, we have visited, and we visited all the Eastern African region. We visited a lot of CIS hospitals where probably it is still not planned to go and deliver radiotherapy, but we visited all of them. And we haven't gone to South America as extensively as we have done here.
In science and technology, do you think that there could be any policy changes through which more of multidisciplinary research or multidisciplinary work could be conducted or used better in practical experiences as well?
Yes. So while what is taught in college is focused on some discipline, but the actual real life is multidisciplinary, right? We encounter on daily basis so many different faculties, different skill sets that we need to even conduct our normal life. So that's the fact of life. So if we cannot assemble a multidisciplinary team to actually do a task which is really good and which matters, and such a thing can be done only by multidisciplinary teams. And the one thing that is required is the person who is going to drive these should have the ability to understand different perspectives of the team members who come in such a discipline, in such a interdisciplinary team. And only with such kind of interdisciplinary teams, we can actually achieve something, kind of task that you also have with you. It can be achieved only with.
On the policy front, Mr. Subramanyam, do you have a wish list? I mean, we are all, as you know, in this project, thinking through different dimensions of this problem. And sometimes cancer is dealt with across so many different areas that, it is precisely the problem framing that ends up being quite difficult within the policy sphere. So you have people who are focused entirely on cost cutting. There are people who are focused on the manufacturing side there and so on. What medical equipment designers such as yourself and people who are overseeing both batch manufacturing and kind of high-end design, as well as a certain amount of commodity manufacturing, what would you like to see? What are, 2 or 3 things that you would like to see? Particularly for India, and then of course we can discuss other places.
So I was about to answer that. I can answer the first part. For India, what happens is we have about 1/4 of the population, but we do not have a medical device which is made for India or which can actually be a real ground for this. So why is it that we do not have? Is it because we do not have the skill sets? We do have the skill sets. Is it because we do not have the market? We do have the market. So what is driving is we are biased in the public procurement, which is a substantial part of medical device industry's revenue for anyone. So we are biased in the way we actually run the policy. And that has resulted in no industry coming up with setting up this. Whether the chicken comes first or egg comes first, this is how things will work. If there are manufacturers in the country, then probably a good policy to procure them. And if there was a policy, then only the industry will actually invest their time and money into it and then go in. So which will come first? According to me, the policy has to actually give preference to this on each category of the product. Like you had referred some things like devices and maybe consumables which can be done. So the consumables are quite easy to address and therefore it's simpler to do. But something where technological investment is required and which is a long-term gestation is there, that is the place where people will actually shy away from getting in. And if the policy does not take into account, we can shy away from this maybe another 2 decades. And when you turn back and see that the country will have no skill sets, no way that you can conduct its future progress. You need to do some basic research in terms of how you attack a disease. These are something that you need. For all of that, a policy is the first framework on which things can make a difference. So the current policy, even today, even the Make in India policy actually does not encourage this even at the operating level. This is a very high level policy that we have. At least we should be thankful there is some policy today which was not existing maybe 6 years ago. So there is some policy of giving preferential procurement in the public domain to this. But unfortunately, the political system is such that some policies in the center need not be implemented by all the states. And that is actually a major problem, because from time to time between these last 7 years, the policy implementation across several states has been changed multiple times because of the political scenario that has changed. And the second part is the implementation of the policy. At the high level, the policy was actually worded and framed very well, but it had left some loopholes for people to actually circumvent what was supposed to be the policy implementation. And such loopholes should be actually tightened very soon. And then if they are tightened, then it's very easy to implement. And then we see more and more technologies coming in. So it's not that everything has to be grown from within the country from ground zero. We will actually be able to even see a lot of people who actually make this equipment maybe outside of India can also come in once the policy is enforced, and they don't want to forego the market, and therefore they would actually bring in. So this is how actually China developed. Majority of the equipment, what you see, is possible for a Chinese company to make whatever has been made by several countries. You take Italy, France, you take UK, you take US or Canada. Whatever is made in all these countries is now made in China. Why? Because they had actually invited people to come in, invest in their item. And therefore, when the whole procurement for such a large population, even within China for internal consumption, was all directed by this way, all the people actually came and brought in technology, and then the overall ecosystem has developed and people have learned. And that has led to more innovations in China, which are really good compared to what is there in the US. So this is how a policy has to be framed.
You know, in medical devices, especially those for designers who are working in radiology, you are not thinking just of one piece of equipment that you're thinking of the console, you're thinking of the materials, you're thinking of all of your integrated circuitry, you've got your visual displays, you've got the dosimetry problems that you have to deal with, and so on. So there are many issues, including vibration, chassis design, all the rest of it. So I wondered whether you could tell us, in terms of procurement policies, where we really are not looking at pricing or even costing competitiveness, but we are looking at overall component cost as well as delivery affordability. What kind of conversation could you imagine where that the cost profile over a period of time to both the patient as well as taxpayer could look quite different? Right now, a lot of, the kind of L1 equivalent of, just come in and write the lowest cost in, and, we'll write you out of the equation fairly early. This doesn't get society ahead. It may get a particular sub-market sorted, and some administrator will make a decision and everybody goes home and sleeps, well or otherwise. But in the long term in society, it doesn't actually solve anyone's problem. So
one is starting from our education in all of these engineering colleges, we need to have a slight difference in the curriculum. Therefore, more and more people are interested in applied research. And for medical devices especially, there is no real curriculum which actually works for any device manufacturer in this country to start their design or their R&D. So it's something that is not easy, I would say. I wouldn't call it impossible. It's not easy. So you have to form a multidisciplinary team. A similar example of that in Panacea is we have probably all the department of an engineering college in our place as departments to do. So that is one basic thing which we have to do. And as far as the L1 criteria that we talked about, the L1 criteria is probably a basis on which we still have to procure, because it has far-reaching implications if we do not have an L1 process, because it could lead to multiple leakages of the taxpayers' money. So I'm not able to think, we did look at this multiple times in our internet discussion, but there would be leakages of the taxpayers' money if L1 is not criteria on which it can be purchased. There is a preference now about L1 and somebody else from outside the country to match the L1 price. These are two criteria that are there. But what happens here is, it is not actually difficult to meet the L1 price for an Indian manufacturer. This is how a responsible manufacturer has to think and bid in these procurement, is what is my personal view. This is what has driven us to reach to here. And as a result, from the day one, our costs are lower than what it would be for the landed cost of any other equipment which is imported outside of the country. If that can be made, if we are able to impose this as a criteria, then what happens is there is a responsibility. That is, there is no free lunch from the day one for all these people who want to make a medical device in the country. We should probably look at supporting these industries with all other logistics, providing the technical skill sets, the several taxpayers' money used in a lot of research labs of this country, who are given a task of publishing papers. That is, their evaluation is based on publishing papers, not on evaluating which of their work, which has been funded by the taxpayers' money, has reached the end result, which they have started or they have quoted. When they send a proposal, they say this technology will result in this benefit for the country or for the society. But at the end of all this, the evaluation for them is on how many papers in which peer journals did you publish. So if you're going to only evaluate them on publishing papers, they will write papers with all the taxpayers' money. If you can actually look at evaluating these technologies on how did it reach. If it doesn't reach, your next project is not going to be approved. So it's not this current item, but you're actually sealing their future for getting any money out of it. As a result, this technology will be forced upon some industry which will make something, and that is the beginning that we have to look at. Why is it that every industry in this country have to be given subsidy? There is no need to give subsidy. If you are looking at every policy where there is a free lunch or a free breakfast, then that will not be a sustainable item. If you want it sustainable, everyone have to chip in. How do they chip in? Any industry which cannot become L1 in the first year will try and strive and go and become L1 in the second year, otherwise they cannot survive. So just leave it to them, leave it to the economics to balance it out. They will become L1 eventually. So the second part is, if you are giving them technology which is homegrown or which is coming from a public pool from other countries, give that, facilitate that. That is what is the policy is supposed to do, not dole out money to them. If you are going to bail the company at every stage, they will be handicapped all through their life. This is my firm personal belief.
Well, it's clear, I think, from the industrial policy side that a great deal of inconsistency results in things that don't directly benefit in health policy or health policy design, and certainly not in procurement. There are definitely these loops. But I want to end it there. Mr. Subramanyam, do you have any last ideas or thoughts you would like to share with the audience? We'd be very glad to hear that.
Yes. So the one last thing is, when you are looking at solving a particular problem on hand, which in the current discussion is about how do we solve the African access to radiotherapy or cancer cure, we should be practical on the ground and understand the realities of what they need, not decide in our own view of what they need. So a lot of on the ground data has to be acquired. We have to visit those places. understand what is the patient's perspective, not the administrator's perspective, not the oncologist's perspective. What is the view of the patient is also to be taken into account, whereby we can actually reach to a situation where our solution will be relevant sooner than later.
Thank you. And I think on that note, a lot of the publications as well as policy scenarios, a lot of the menus that are coming out of our project over the next year or 2 years will be very much open, available to anyone. And this is something coming out across the teams. We are still in data collection mode on the India side, but a lot of our colleagues in both Kenya and Tanzania are in the mode of publishing and getting it out, including in conversations with policymakers. So, Mr. Subramanyam, great thanks to you for sharing your time today.
Thank you. And that's the reason why actually we are participating in this, because we understand that through this project, you're actually going on ground and capturing all the data. Once it is widely known, many more people can actually read that and take up, and hopefully in very short time, we'll all be able to solve actual problems which patients in Africa are facing, that is inaccessible therapy.
And those in India as well. We have a long way to go. So thank you very much, Mr. Subramanyam. It really was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you for listening to the ICCA India podcast. Do follow our social media handles and stay tuned for the next episode.